In the book of Isaiah, chapter 55, for my thoughts are not your thoughts. Thank you. Neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. As the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return to it without watering the earth and making it bud and flourish so that it yields seed for the sower and the bread for the eater, so is my word that goes out from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it. You will go out in joy and be led forth in peace, and the mountains and the hills will burst into song before you, and all the trees of the field will clap their hands. Instead of the thorn bush will grow the juniper, and instead of briars the myrtle will grow. This will be for the Lord's renown, for an everlasting sign that will endure forever. Jesus, great are you. You are the Alpha, you are the Omega, you are the beginning, you are the end, you are everything that fills the middle part. Father, you have been here for each and every one of us. Even in the moments that we couldn't see it, even in the moments that we lived in valleys, the moments that we were on top of mountains, in the midst of storms, in the midst of chaos, when faced by an ocean that had no way across, you made a way. Great are you. So, Father, I thank you for today and this moment. I pray that you shape us today, Father. You call us to a deeper walk today. We love you so much, Jesus. It's in your name I pray. Amen. You may be seated. I absolutely love that passage. I actually preached an entire sermon on that passage, and it's one of my favorites. And it's the whole reality of the fact that God is sitting here saying, look, it's just like rain. If I'm going to send rain down to the earth, you have a responsibility to respond. If I'm going to send blessings down to you on earth, you have a responsibility to respond to that. If I send you a word, you need to respond, because it's this everlasting thing. And he makes that very clear. I need it to return to me fulfilled. This Big Ten series has been a fun one. I want to thank Pastor Doug for preaching a good portion of it. It's been quite a summer, and he did such a good job. If you missed any of them, I want to challenge you to go back and to listen and to watch. You can do that through our podcast, and you can also do that through YouTube. But today's about God. You know, it's funny because I posted that the other day on Facebook. I was like, as we finish out the Big Ten talking about God. Well, shouldn't we always talk about God? Yeah, but listen, this is a little bit more direct today, okay? We learned about 10 major stories in the Bible. Well, 9, and today's the 10th. And we learned about 9 other major stories in the Bible. And what I think is so incredible is that even from the time of creation, we find that these stories are relevant to us today. I'm going to tell you something. If anybody ever tells you that the Bible is irrelevant because it was written thousands of years ago, they're wrong. And most likely have never even read it. The things that they went through then are the things that we go through now. People go, oh, they didn't deal with anxiety and depression and stuff like that then. Yeah, they did. Oh, they didn't deal with these things with all these different things happening in the world. Yeah, they did. They didn't deal with plagues. Oh my gosh, have you ever read Exodus? Like, come on, they've dealt with these things. This takes place. But what I love about this is that over and over and over again, listen to me, God shows up. I needed this reminder this week. I needed this reminder this summer. It's been rough. But the way that God reveals and shows himself over and over and over again is simply incredible. From the beginning of time with creation and how he created us, And then to the fall of man, and he still had mercy on us, to then the story of Jacob. And I love the story of Jacob. And there's this passage in there where the Lord appears to Jacob. And he said that, hey, listen, I want you to know that I am the God of Abraham. I am the God of Isaac. And then he says this to Jacob. And I believe there's somebody in this room today that needs this word. He says this, know that I am with you. And I will protect you wherever you go and bring you back to this land. Know that I am with you. Listen, I get it. You know, Mother Teresa wrote in her biography that she went over 20 years without hearing a word from God. I've said that before, and I'm going to say it again because I just find it so incredible. This woman of God, that she's going out, she's literally pouring her entire life in it, living in poverty and making sure that she is taking care of everybody before her own basic needs. And she is living her life for the creator of the universe. And she's like, I went 20 years without even feeling like he was here. Could you imagine? I go a few months and I'm freaking out. Like, what's going on? What have I done wrong? What did I do to make him mad? What did I do to upset God so much that he doesn't want to be here anymore? I had this picture in my mind. It was of God in like my cell phone. I know, it sounds crazy, right? But what I love about God is that he doesn't take the things that he's blessed you with and hold it in front of you and say, hey, you're screwing up, I'm taking this from you. Oh, you didn't talk to me today. No, you didn't talk to me today. You know what I'm going to do? You don't eat. I'm going to take away your home because you haven't been chatting with me. You haven't been living the life that I've called you to do. I called you to serve in ministry and you're not there yet. What's going on? I'm just going to take everything from you. No, it's not how he works. He doesn't say, hey, do you remember that time that I blessed you? When are you going to bless me back? He says, just know that I'm always with you. I'm with you in the hard times. I'm with you in the good times. I'm with you when you remember me. I'm with you when you forget about me. I am with you, and I promise to protect you. Yeah, I get it. That's easier said than done, because sometimes you just sit here and go, where's the protection at now, God? Come on, what's going on? What's happening here? Why do I feel this way? Why am I going through this? He says, I'm going to protect you, and I'm going to bring you back to this land. I'm going to bring you back to this place that I've called you to be in, into his kingdom. And God fulfills his promise over and over and over again. Think about the calling that he gave to Noah. 600 years old. Guy's done. He's washed up. And I think for Noah's sake, he's got to be a little frustrated at the blessing at the end of it, because when he gets done with all these things that he does and God's talking to him, you know what God tells him to do? Go out and be fruitful. He's like, I'm 600 years old, man. Like, go be fruitful. What are you talking about? That's craziness. I'm a 600-year-old man. What's going on? But God uses people, even in the times that we don't feel like we can be used. I can't tell you how many times in the church that I've heard somebody tell me that they've already served their time. You know how old I am? I don't do that anymore. Man, please. I think one of the greatest things that I ever learned was, and it was at a sad moment in my life, but it was when my great-grandma, my mama, was passing away. We knew the time was coming. We knew what was going on. She was in nursing homes, and then from nursing homes, hospice took over, and she moved in with my grandmother and grandfather, and they lived in the home all together, and we'd go over and visit, and some days were good days, and some days were bad days. But I'll never forget that even to the day that she died, she was inviting people to come to church. She wanted people to know who Jesus was. Would you come to church with me? Nana or Mama, you haven't been to church in months, but would you come to church with me? Let me tell you about my Jesus. And they're in there trying to do their job. And they're in there minding their own business, just trying to get the job done so they can get going again. And she's like, hold on a minute, dear. We're going to talk about this. What do you think about this? Do you go to church somewhere? And she was evangelizing to her very last moments. And this story that I heard at NYC 2015. This is why I'm so excited about our students right now. Because this NYC, this Nazarene Youth Conference that they get to go to here in a year, they're going to look back 7 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later and say, man, I remember this moment. But there was this pastor, and he said that a tethered Bible is evidence of a life that is not. I thought, ooh, that's good. But I didn't really understand it until I was given her Bible. And there was no cover. And there was pages missing, and there were pages that were bent over, and there were pages that were torn. And it was so bad, that we ended up having to purchase a box for it to put it in so that we could keep it safe. And that torn up, messed up Bible that some people would look at as a sin is evidence of a life that is not, is evidence of a life that she went to battle. She went to war for a lot of people, because other things we found of hers were prayer journals and names written in here. And you go through the pages and you find tear-stained pages and all these different things in there to show that that was used for the purpose that it was given for. Not just to get up and read from, not just to get up and have what God is saying to me today, right here. Instead of them, he will honor of God for the treasures. Okay, God's going to give me treasures. What a great day. This is a wonderful time. No, it's made for battle. It's made for when life is hell, that you can go to this and know that God is with you. So God uses people, even when they feel like they're done. Even when they feel like they're an outsider, he uses you. Think about how alone Noah had to feel if he was the only one that God could go to in that moment. The world's fallen apart, and Noah is standing firm on the solid rock foundation of God. Then you think of Moses. Oh my goodness. He doesn't even want to talk. Like this Moses guy, he's not qualified to do anything. He's not qualified to go talk to a group of people. He's not qualified to go talk to a king. Are you kidding me? But what does he do? God calls him, and he gives him a partner to go and to face the king with. And they keep going back and forth, and you can go back and read the story yourself, but he leads God's people. He's called to lead God's nation. And what's he do? He gathers them up, and they're following him because they've seen him. They said, okay, I get it. Like, Moses, man, the things that you're saying are going to happen. They're happening. Like, you must be a man of God. And they start to follow him, and they take off, and all of a sudden in front of them, it's got to be like going to the beach. Have you ever been to the beach before? You kind of go over. There's always that hill, right? There's always that road. And as you're getting close, all of a sudden it's just like, whew, and it's just nothing but water. And it's like one of the most beautiful sights in the world. But for them, that was not a beautiful sight. They get to the water and they look at Moses and they question him. What in the world? You brought us here? We did all this traveling for nothing? What in the world are you going to do? But what I love about this is what God does in our lives. We get moving. And things are going great. We feel like we're escaping our past. We feel like we're getting better. We're growing. We're maturing. And God is with us. But then all of a sudden we hit this wall of water. And it's like, how am I going to get across this? I am not that good of a swimmer. Doggy paddle's not going to get me over those waves. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And God shows up and makes a way. That story is so incredible because there were so many moving parts to that story. Not only was it water that he moved, but he made the ground dry. This is the God that thinks of everything. When you say, oh man, I don't know, God. What are you doing in my life right now? Listen to me, I'm telling you this. He's the God that thinks of everything, every part of it. Because if he would have just parted the waters, they would have just sunk down in the mud. They would have gone nowhere. Then you got Jericho. Man, do you have the faith that if God says to you, go and march around a kingdom, a wall, a fence line for 6 days? Like, just go and march. Just go and march. We'll see what happens on the seventh day. I think a lot of us are going to sit here and go, you're nuts. I'm not going to go march for 6 days straight. What are you talking about? You want me to do what? No. If I do it one time, that's sufficient, God. If I do it one time, that's sufficient. But when he speaks, there's a purpose behind there. And Joshua found that. Joshua found his purpose. Jonah. What a turd. He reminds me so much of me at times. Good night. When God calls you, he doesn't stop. He doesn't stop calling. When he releases you, he releases you. Sometimes we want the release. Sometimes we want to be able to move on. Sometimes we want to have a new season in our life, but God's like, hey, no, not yet. I've called you to this. I shared this story the other day, and there's a guy that I know that he, at the age of 19 years old, was called into youth ministry, and he said no. And God called and called and called and called and called. The guy's 70 years old now and a youth pastor because he finally accepted his call to ministry. Could you imagine 50 years of God calling you to be a youth pastor and you saying, no, thank you, I'm good. And then 70 years old becoming a youth pastor? Dodgeball looks a whole lot different at that age. The fifth graders probably win. I don't know. Usually it's the other way around. Usually youth pastors are youth pastors because they get the opportunity to throw a rubber ball and drill a junior high kid in the face with it. But I don't know about that guy. But Jonah, what's he do? He goes to this great city of Nineveh. And God asks him to go to this city and preach against it because it's wicked. Its wickedness has come up before me. Jonah, I'm calling you to do something big. Go out and be bold. Jonah runs away from the Lord, heading to Tarshish. He runs. How many of us today can relate to that? Nah, I don't think so, God. That's nuts. That's nuts. No way I'm going to do that. He turns and he runs. He's like, no, We know the story then. Fish comes in. If you don't know the story, you weren't here, sinners. And he comes in, and the fish eats him, fish or whale. Pastor Doug told me that there was a discrepancy with the kids on whether it's a fish or a whale. And so all this stuff happens. A whole chapter worth of things take place. And then in chapter 3, God says these words again, go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message that I give you. And then Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and went to Nineveh. Nineveh was so big, it took him 3 days to travel. After all this stuff, listen, I've been there. I've told God no. I've walked away from things he's asked me to do. And it's like the greatest weight you've ever felt in your life. You go to bed, you can't sleep. You try to go to school and you can't think. You try to read other scriptures and you can't because he keeps sending you back to something about calling you to do something. He sends you into Jonah. He understands and knows the importance behind what he's calling you to. I love this parable that we talked about. parable, simply as this is a story. It's a story. It wasn't real. It was not true. It wasn't real. It wasn't something that happened. It's a story that God tells, that Jesus tells. And so Jesus is talking to his friends, and they're walking by, and they're asking questions, and they're trying to understand some things. Because he keeps talking about this thing called a neighbor. What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to love God and love your neighbor. He doesn't say love your friend. He doesn't say love your family. He says love your neighbor. And they're like, come on, can't you make this easy on us? Like, who are we supposed to love? And so he's sitting there, and he says a few things, and then he says this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And they looked at him again, and they said this: define neighbor. Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. So he tells the story about this guy he's walking down the road, and he gets mugged, and he gets beaten, and he's laying half to death on the road, and he has nothing. Everything's been taken from him. And you know who the first one to come to him was? The pastor. The pastor. He comes walking up to him and sees him and goes, no, thank you. And somebody else of faith comes walking by him, and they look at him, and they turn their head like, I did not see him there. But then the Samaritan walks by, sees him, makes eye contact with him, and V-lines for him. Not only does he make sure he's okay, but he provides for him. He loads him up, and he takes him back and cares for him for days. Nurses him back to health. And Jesus says, which of these is your neighbor? Which of these would you like to be your neighbor? Is it the ones that don't want anything to do with you? The sad part is that those other ones can represent friends, they can represent family, they can represent coworkers. They can represent people in the church. That's a neighbor. Somebody that's willing to drop everything to care for the least of these. And he teaches us such a strong story by that. We learned last week about Zacchaeus, hated man. It's kind of like Levi. He was a tax collector. Nobody really liked him. He was the one that sent out those letters asking you to provide gas receipts for the last 10 years of your life. Prove that you drove that much. That's what he would say. No, he didn't say that. They didn't have cards back then, if you didn't know that. I saw Peyton kind of looking like, oh, what kind of cars did they have back then? But Jesus, listen, I love this. Jesus in public, not in secret. He could have waited. He could have waited and sent one of his disciples to go back and talk to Zacchaeus and say, hey, I want to go eat dinner with him. Could you go drop a note to him, let him know? Maybe he fold it up and make it look like a paper football and then send it back to him, kind of like in school, passing notes. But he didn't do that. He's in the middle of everybody. The most hated man. He's up in a tree. And Jesus is like, hey, Zacchaeus, what's up? Man, I want to eat dinner with you. Would you have me at your house? Ooh. Think about that. Think about that for a minute. What about these politicians out there running for office? You think they're walking around their campaign trail and all of a sudden find the most hated person around town and calling them out and asking if they can go eat some dinner with them? No, it might cost them some votes. You think Jesus cared about votes? You think Jesus cared about popularity? He knew that the things he was doing was not popular. He knew that the things that he was doing was not going to cast him a bunch of votes and wasn't going to make him the most popular person to ever walk the earth. But he knew how to define success in the lives of people converting, knowing him and spending an eternity in heaven with him. There's a song, it's called Same God. Love the song. If you haven't heard it yet, it's by Elevation. I heard it months ago. I didn't really want to hear it. I heard it. I thought, man, this got a good tune to it. I really don't want to hear it. Because it talks about all these things that God is. And sometimes in life we get frustrated. We go through medical things and we can't figure out what's going on with different things. Or things in life aren't always kosher and they're not always going the way that we had hoped they would go, or all these different things. And so there's times that you're just like, I just don't want to hear this. But a couple weeks ago, second week of vacation, I started listening to that song and it changed my life. And it wasn't that song that changed my life, it was the way that God works in our lives that changed it. To think about the fact that the God of Jacob, the God of Moses, the God of Mary, the God from the very beginning is the one who is here with us today. The God who spoke through a burning bush to Moses is the same God that calls you. How incredible of a feeling is that? Ethan and I were talking about this the other day. Sometimes it's hard to even think about that, to comprehend the fact that that's the same God of today. It says that, here's some of the lyrics from it. The same God that called Jacob, the one who loves for all generations. He calls Moses the one who parts the ocean. He calls Mary the one whose favor rests on the lowly. And David, my favorite one, who you made a shepherd boy courageous. Just a plain old shepherd boy. And you had him face Goliath. And then it says, I may not face Goliath, but I've got my own giants. And the chorus, my God, I need you. What an incredible statement. Don't we all? So today we're going to do communion together. And you might be in a place in yourself right now where you're facing your Goliath. You're facing your giant. You're trying to get past it. How does your Bible look? Are you digging into the Word? Are you focusing on what God has for you and the things that God can do for you? Or are you fighting that giant with drugs, with alcohol? Are you trying to mask it? This defeats. Those other things make it worse. Are you hiding secrets in your life and you believe that you can hide them from everybody in the world, including God? But it doesn't seem like anything's really going right. Don't fool yourself. Know that God is there. What did he say? Know that I am with you always, and I will protect you wherever you go. Are you willing to be faithful? When God sends his blessings down from the heavens, are you willing to respond? So, Jesus, he meets with his disciples in the upper room and he tells them what's getting ready to happen and what's going on. And he takes and he breaks the bread and he gives thanks. And he tells them that when you take and eat this, remember that my body is broken for you. And then he took the wine and he showed it to him and he said, when you take and drink this, I want you to remember always that my blood was shed for you. Man, so powerful. My blood was shed for Alicia, for Mason, for Ella, for Peyton and Noah and Ethan, for Parker. Christian, it was shed for you too, buddy. How incredible of a feeling is that? The creator of the universe, creator of heaven, the sustainer of life, calls on to you. So Jesus, I ask you today to transform our lives. To bless our lives. Father, I know that there are people in here that are sick. There are people in here that are hurting. There are people online that cannot be with us today because of the same. And Father, I pray that breakthrough begins to happen because you are the God of breakthrough. God, you are the God that is far greater than anything we could comprehend. You are the God that can bring healing to our lives. You are the God that can bring all the breakthroughs that we need. You are the God that can break the chains of addiction. You are the God that can set us free. And you show us what true love looks like. I thank you so much for this moment today. It's in your name I pray. Amen. Jesus, we thank you for this moment. We thank you for the way that you work in our lives. And Father, I pray today as we go that we glorify your name in all things that we do. That we know that we're called regardless of what it may look like. We're called to a mission field. We're called to reach out. So Father, I pray that we do just that as we leave today. That we know that you are the God of Abraham, you are the God of Isaac, and you promise that you will always be here with us. So we thank you for that, Jesus. It's in your name I pray. Amen. Students.
Hello, my name is Doug Doms. I'm the executive pastor here at the Movement Church. It is through your blessings that this ministry continues to reach out and touch lives that might not have been touched otherwise. If you want to continue to support our ministry, please go to Movementchurch.community. And please remember to tell your friends, go on social media, tell your friends at Movement 937. God bless you and have a wonderful day, and thanks again.